What's up, Chris? How you doing?
What's going on, Jay? I'm excited to be here. To everyone that's watching, welcome to the On the Rocks podcast, the podcast where we talk about accounting and accounting related information, mostly as it relates to e-commerce, but not only. I'm Chris Kino, and I'm here with my co-host Jay Kimmelman.
Sup?
Last last week, last week we talked about the value that companies can get from outsourcing, and specifically talked about the value of an outsourced CFO, like myself or like Jay, and the value that we can provide. This week, we're going to talk about where your inventory is located. This will include impacts related to shipping, considerations of landed costs, and general conversations around supply chain. But before we get to that, what happened this week? I know we're in the middle of March Madness still. Jay, I think we talked about it last week. No
We
brackets
did.
for you.
No
Um,
brackets.
I have I did 4 brackets on ESPN. One of them is in the 92nd or something percentile. Thankfully, it's the one that I prepped up for my wife to send to her workplace and put into her work pool. Um,
Nice.
so I'm hopeful we'll see how that goes. But I also picked Houston to win the title, and they looked really bad at the last few minutes of their game against A&M the last time that they played. So if they win the title, I'm going to be a little bit surprised, but I'm also going to be pretty stoked because they're the team that I picked in every like big bracket I'm in. So
There you
fingers
go.
crossed on that. Yeah,
Yeah.
up up in Capitol Hill, they were doing work this week. They passed a 1.2 trillion dollar spending bill that got signed earlier this week. But as far as I have heard, there's surprisingly no updates about our
Nope.
actual tax bill. And
Crickets.
then yeah, and so it's starting to feel a little bit more like that's just never going to happen. Um, and maybe they'll do something again at the end of this year, or maybe after the election passes. Maybe I don't know. We'll guess we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But like we've talked about a bunch of times, we will update you when we know.
Well,
um,
the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was set up to reverse a lot of the changes that were made after the 8 years it was in place. So as soon
yeah,
as the next president takes over, or the next inauguration, you got to look at it immediately. So yeah.
yeah. So it's going to be something that's really important because there are loads of impacts that come out of TCJA. There were changes to corporate taxing rates. There's just lots and lots of stuff that was in there. And
The
so if all of
corporate, a
that,
lot of the corporate stuff was made permanent, though. It's the
oh, okay,
individual side that was going to revert back. So,
all right,
on top of inflation and all the other factors driving prices up, the impact will drive the tax rates back to what it was pre 2018,
oh boy,
and we will see the tax burdens go way up. So yeah, it's not
yeah,
going to be pretty at that point. So
yeah,
I'm
no,
sure it's going to get looked at.
that's not too exciting. So hopefully it gets looked at and we don't just get
Yeah.
stuck in this dead space like we've been now. But we will see what comes along from there. Oftentimes with spending bills, there can be tax impacts, but as far as we know, there's not one in this one, right?
No, I don't believe
Yep,
there is. I didn't hear anything about any changes there.
that's good. That's good. Well, obviously, at the beginning of this week, there was a really tragic boating incident. That's going to be the subject of what we talk about a little bit today. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it here, but it is definitely something that impacts e-commerce. And it's definitely something that's big news. I think one interesting thing to think about that's like, how do you, what happens when this happens? Let's say you're the boating company. How do you account for this? Like,
Oh, for
uh,
sure.
yeah, or the city of Baltimore. What you just lost one of your biggest bridges. The like, what do you are you impairing it now? That that that's like one of the things people never talk about in stuff like this. Probably because it's kind of ridiculous to talk about, but it's also like a thing that happens, and there are random outputs that you just don't ever think about from tragedies like this. So, um,
But
who?
think about it, government infrastructure. I mean, the
Yeah,
government doesn't pay tax. The cities don't pay tax. do they capitalize and depreciate that equipment?
Well, they should,
They
and you could
should.
and you could probably go figure out whether they were or not,
Right.
because the most cities have reporting requirements of some sort to the public, and I don't remember what it stands for, which is a little bit embarrassing. But at one point in time, I worked on some governmental audits, and that main paperwork is called the CAFR. I don't remember, probably Comprehensive Annual Financial Report or something like that. But cities
That's
do have that.
the yellow book auditing or
Yeah,
audits
right,
that you're
exactly.
referring to.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
That's all I
Um,
remember out of audit class on government.
even though I did one of these audits, that's about all I remember too.
Yeah.
So that's been 15 years ago now when I did that audit, and it is a really interesting thing to think about fund accounting, about governmental accounting generally, and how you do account for infrastructure, because you spend a lot of money on it, and that's absolutely true. And then you have a lot of money that comes in, especially if you're a big city like Baltimore, in a big state, or in at least a state with a lot of government spending. So I'm sure their CAFR is really big, and I'm sure that city officials are not really excited about this. I saw some polling that was done by Mike Sylvester. So Boomer Mike, shout out to Boomer Mike. And in the poll results at the time that I voted in the poll, the majority of people felt that it would take at least 3 years to rebuild the bridge. That's obviously just the public. I don't know if we have any extra insight on that,
Right.
truly, but that's a really long time, and that's imagine the scope of that project. Planning out a project that rebuilds a gigantic bridge like that,
Right.
that's a substantial project and
Yeah,
takes a lot of time.
There's no comparing this to the bridge that went out in Philadelphia, a couple months ago.
Mm.
So, they got that up in 2 weeks. This is full spans. They're going to have to go in the water. They have to test, go out and test the support structures that have come up through the water and make sure that they're still okay. I mean, we know that 2 of them are going to have to be replaced at this point.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be huge.
Yeah, that's a big project. A lot of time, a lot of money.
Yeah.
There are positives from that. Hey, Christy, good to see you
Christy.
too.
Hey, followers out there.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into that, and there are a lot of people that can benefit from those types of things too, because now there's work that needs to be done, specialized work too. So there are certain spaces where repairing a bridge is a very important thing. So,
well, in this case, it's super important because I don't know if you've ever been on I-95 through Maryland going into DC.
I have not.
There is a tunnel, a memorial tunnel, I believe it's called, and trucks and hazardous material are not allowed through that tunnel. They cross that bridge. So it is part of the I-95 system down the East Coast. So it is a huge thoroughfare, and it has a larger impact than we know.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll only even start to realize that over the next weeks and months for sure. There is no question.
But I gotta say, I've been catching some of the conspiracy theories around this whole thing, and they're just out there. I mean, it's like, the boat had mechanical problems. It hit the bridge.
It doesn't look that complicated. I agree.
Right. I mean, people are like, well, based on the angle of this happening, and it turned that way, and yeah, I get it. But you also had current.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of factors at play there, and it's like, yeah, you can shoot down every conspiracy theory out there. So.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like one that makes a lot of sense as a conspiracy. This truly seems like a unfortunate, tragic accident.
But watching the coverage of that when it happened, they're talking. I think it was one of the fire chiefs or something. He's like, yeah, the first call came in at 1:40. You could see the timing from the camera was 1:27, I believe. And it's like the first call came in at 1:40, and our first responders were on the scene at 1:50 a.m. I'm like, it took 10 minutes, really?
At 1:45 in the morning.
Right. And then it was the next morning, they had the tapes, and actually the boat put out a mayday call. And within 90 seconds, they had both ends of that bridge blocked.
Yeah, and so that's a pretty amazing feat of first response as well. Like, it's tragic as it is, right? Ooh, I nailed it. Good job by me.
You did. Good job.
So yeah, no, it's a tragic situation for the people that were on the bridge already.
For sure.
But it's a huge relief that it wasn't significantly worse.
Yeah.
And that is a big shout out to the first responders that helped to do that. 90 seconds to close off those edges. That's amazing.
Amazing, truly.
Because
I mean, it was 1:30 in the morning, but having driven the I-95 corridor, doesn't matter what time of day, it's busy.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, especially if it's a cross. I think that's where all the commerce is going. That's exactly. Amazing work.
Yep.
Obviously, we're right here at the end of March, so 1040s and all of the stuff that comes along with that. We're 2 weeks out, so it's getting to be there. 16 days. That's not very many. So prayers up for all the tax accountants out there. I know that it's going to be a hectic few weeks. If you don't have your paperwork from your clients, please put them on extension. Don't waste your time over these next 16 days trying to squeeze in people who are looking at last minutes.
Yeah, and do something for yourselves. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Take breaks. Get some food in you. You got to fuel up.
Yep.
Got to keep that brain moving.
Keep moving. I love that. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. In fact, today I went earlier this afternoon to go play some pickleball with my wife. They put a little pickleball court out in the community in one of the parks here. And so Amazon was running a sale, and so I bought a cheap pickleball racket set, and we went over there. It was pretty windy, but it was good to run around, and I felt great afterwards. It was a 7-minute bike ride, so I'm pretty close by. Nice, fun little afternoon time. I think my wife and I have talked about doing that pretty regularly on Fridays, and so building in that structure and making sure that you're making time for yourself, both to be active and just to make sure that you have you time, is very important. And especially, again, like we talked about last time, as we head towards these deadlines, it's that much more important. What else happened this week, Jay?
From a business standpoint, business as usual,
Yeah. All right.
But Major League Baseball kicked off this week. That's
exciting.
Oh
my gosh, that's a huge thing. I forgot about
that. Huge thing right there. Considering your Rangers won the World Series.
Did we lose yesterday? Last I checked, we were losing. It was in the 6th inning. So that I think 3 of our best guys aren't even supposed to play until a quarter through the season or something, because they were hurt. DeGrom, I think, is not supposed to be pitching for a while, and
that's not good.
A couple other we're gonna have some problems in the title defense. So hopefully they don't get too far behind. I don't know what happened yesterday, but I'm assuming it was a loss.
Yeah.
but I guess we'll find out.
So there are new rules that go into effect. Even shrunk down
true?
Time. Pitch,
even shorter.
Pitch clock. Yeah, 18 seconds, 18.7 seconds when there's runners on base. But, talking about rule changes, the NFL came out with kickoff rule changes for next year.
I heard about this.
And the kicking team now starts 5 yards away from the receiving team on the field.
Right, yeah.
But they can't move until the ball hits the ground. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Sorry, I was looking it up because I needed to know. The Rangers made a dramatic comeback, a 10th inning win, 4-3. Shout out to the Rangers, a title defense W.
There you go.
Which is huge. The new kickoff rules, I think, will be very interesting in the NFL. The kickoffs have often been extremely exciting plays, but they nerfed them pretty bad with some recent rule changes with the intention of player safety.
Right.
And I think what they've what they realized is that they nerfed them a little too hard. So they're going to try and pump them back up a little bit by reconfiguring the rules.
Yep.
Everything that I've heard is that it's going to look a little bit weird at first. You're going to be like, what is happening right now? My expectation is that it will at least introduce some excitement again, at least for the first part of the season. If it ends up that teams are able to take advantage and lots of long kick returns are happening, I think we'll see kicks into the end zone again, the way that we have in the past. Even though the touchback rule is now the 30 instead of the 25.
35.
So,
I think it's 35.
No, on the way back. On the way back.
Yeah.
So it's coming out all the way to the 35. Oh my God.
So they're trying to keep them from having the touchback.
Yeah.
And keep it in, have them catch it. Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
It'll be exciting. We will see what happens there, but that'll definitely be exciting. Jay, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking ice water today. As you've noticed, I've got this cough going on, and I have been keeping my body full of cough syrup so I wouldn't be coughing all day.
Yeah.
And I'm still having some fits, so I didn't want to, have the effects of the cough syrup and the alcohol on top of it. So,
how is Florida water? Is it well maintained? I don't know much about it.
It tastes like dirt, but
there you go.
We have two filters for it. So
there you go. Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Today I am drinking Sitting Side Haze.
Nice.
Which is a New England style IPA out of No Label Brewing. I didn't need to look at where this was brewed to know from the name that this was brewed in the Houston area, because that is definitely a play on some Houston rap scene music.
Okay.
Sitting Sideways and it was brewed in Katy. So Katy is one of the suburbs to the west of Houston. It's right there. So not surprising to me that this was brewed in the Houston area. If it hadn't have been, I would have had to do some research to be like, what? Who stole this? This doesn't seem fine. The logo and stuff is all like car with the spinners.
Oh yeah.
Like a big longhorn on the front there.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Definitely Texas style.
Texas style, absolutely. Yeah. And definitely Houston Third Coast. That sitting sideways is very it's part of a rap song. So right from there makes sense. Felt appropriate today.
There you go.
I actually am almost done. Should have brought a second one of something else, but what are you gonna do?
Exactly. Throw it back.
I'm not gonna throw. I'm gonna throw it back. I'm gonna try to take my time with it so that it can continue to enjoy it through our conversation today.
There you go.
Speaking of, let's get to it. Like I mentioned earlier this week, there was a tragic boat incident in Baltimore. This accident is expected to have ramifications across the supply chain. A few years ago, everybody will remember the boat that got stuck in the Suez Canal and all of the problems that boat caused. Boats coming across the world to Europe and the U.S. are choosing different routes because of all of the violence in the Red Sea right now. And so there's disruption all over the world's supply chain, and it can have significant impacts to e-commerce and retail entities without question, as well as all kinds of other entities too.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to talk a little bit about today. So what are some of those impacts? I think some of them are pretty clear. The first one is higher shipping costs. When it takes more time to get to somewhere, or you're spending more effort in moving a boat or moving inventory around the world, your costs are going to go up. Obviously, and similarly, like your lead times are going to go up. It's going to take longer to get the product from point A to point B. And then there's situations where you may end up losing goods. So in the Red Sea, if your stuff is on a boat that gets caught or it gets bombed or something, you could lose some of the stuff that you have. If the bridge falls on the container that your stuff is in, you've lost that inventory. And so there are all kinds of those are like very basic impacts. What other impacts do you see from all the shipping disruption, Jay?
I mean, from what I'm seeing, and it's mostly the longer shipping times and not planning for it.
Yeah,
Because, if you have your ERP system set up right, you have those lead times in there and you're placing your orders based on those lead times,
right.
and you're expecting those shipments in at a specific time. You're running your inventory levels down much lower than you're probably comfortable with.
Right.
And at that point, are you having to place more frequent orders, place larger orders? And that plays into that one thing that we love talking about, cash flow.
Absolutely.
And, you never want to run out of inventory. I mean, granted, there are better times of the year than others, and that
Yeah.
could be, cyclical based on your industry. But I mean, you wouldn't want something like that happen during the Christmas New Year's
No.
season. Never.
No, you would not.
And that's why you start placing your orders. You start planning your orders now,
Right.
because some of that takes 2 or 3 months to manufacture, and then it's got to be shipped. So you're looking at those things now. Something else to be considering is how you're working with your manufacturers.
Yeah.
In order to work through some issues like this, maybe you have them manufacture larger volumes than you're planning on shipping. And I know I've worked with some clients that we were able to get the manufacturer to manufacture double, triple batches of the product, but only ship a single batch of it at a time. And they would hold it and not bill for it until the time came that they actually shipped it. And at that point, they wanted the payment for it when it shipped. But if you did that and you had those types of arrangements, you could put, cases of it and ship it air and get it when you need it. And so you got to be flexible enough and think forward and out of the box to be able to have solutions like that in your back pocket.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we talked about today are why does this matter? So higher shipping costs and longer lead times, why do those things matter? And Jay, you're summarizing that exactly the way I'd expect. Right. There are some pretty obvious impacts, right? General inflation, right? Price increases mean that you have to pay more money. That means that you're going to have to have more cash on hand. You're going to have to be able to do something there. That may mean that you need to consider adjusting your product price. And so to recover some of those charges, because it may be that the situation that you're in is one where that additional shipping charge is a lot versus one that's relatively negligible. And so you have to be responsive if you don't want to lose that extra margin in order to make sure that your business is still profitable, that the inventory that you do have locally, that it's something that you're recovering the cost of effectively. Another one, and this is pretty clear, is order timing, order strategy, all of the stuff around ordering, right? That's obviously critical. Partnering with your vendors and your suppliers and having those conversations of how is this impacting you? What is this doing to your expectations? What's this doing to the other people that you're manufacturing for? If you're manufacturing for people other than us,
Right.
Get that information from them so that you can plan appropriately. One thing that I think is really important is that this matters because it does truly impact your inventory pricing and your carrying values of your inventory because of all of those landed costs, all of those additional costs. When you have additional shipping charges, you need to capture those within the inventory valuation. And so that means that you need to have a good system to be able to do that. It means that your system needs to be flexible for when those types of things change. And it does mean that when you get to the end of the year, or if you get to the end of a period in time and you're in a place where inventory that you carry on hand is being taxed at its value, that may mean that your tax bill is a little bit higher. There are some considerations that you want to have in place around that. When big things like this happen, it's also a good time to revisit your FOB your like what are your freight charges? Who's really at risk? So if the bridge falls on the thing, is it the shipping company that's at risk? Is it you? Is it your customer? Like revisiting and understanding your exposure there can be really important because those types of things do matter in these unusual type of situations. It doesn't happen a lot. Obviously, there's loads and loads and loads of boats on the sea at any point in time. But if tragedy strikes one of them, how does that impact you? And is it going from you to someone, or is it coming to you? Like that's also a big impact, and there are considerations that you need to be thinking about at that time. What other things matter here?
So you brought up FOB rules, and
Yeah.
it really depends if you are the shipper or the receiver in this. But
Yeah.
if title transfers from the time it leaves the shipping, the dock or the
Yeah.
warehouse, that now belongs to me as the owner of a company.
Right.
And I've just laid out a couple $100,000 for that inventory. And I am going to double check that I have insurance coverage for in transit inventory.
Absolutely.
Because if something happens there, I have to have the coverage because let's say the
Yeah.
bridge took a shipping container off the ship and dropped
Right.
it in the water. That's gone. That inventory is gone. And if I didn't
Nothing.
have insurance coverage for it,
So is that $100,000?
yeah, exactly. So, and what I need to do immediately after that is place another order to replace it. And like I
Right.
said, hopefully it's already in stock and they can just get it shipped out and, get that moving. But, I'm still going to have to pay for it. And so be looking at your insurance policies and making sure you're covered for things like that.
Yeah, and also not just your insurance policies, but also understanding those FOB rules for
Sure.
the shipments that you have, right? Because if it's the opposite direction and it's not you on the hook until it's FOB, if it's FOB receiving or whatever,
Right.
that's a much different situation. Then you're insuring yourself against nothing, and so you're probably paying for insurance that you may not even need. So being aware and understanding what those different what the different shipping terms are, because there are like a very wide variety of them. Understanding what they are and how they impact you as the business is extremely important. Absolutely.
Most
What
definitely.
why else does this matter? Yeah, that's fine. There may not be. We've talked about a lot of things.
That's a lot of it right there.
Yeah.
It's your cost and it's the lost opportunity cost that you run
Yeah.
out of inventory. And should that
Right.
happen, you might lose customers over it because they can go to company Y over there that makes kind of the same thing. And
Yeah.
you don't want to lose customers like that. And
No,
hopefully
certainly
doesn't
not.
happen.
No, but and if as long as you can avoid it, of course, like there
Yeah.
you would much prefer to. So speaking to that, like what other things can you do? I think the easiest thing is what we've already talked about a little bit, and that's just be aware. Know
Yeah.
where your inventory is. Like have an understanding of when it's leaving, wherever it's being produced, where it's going, how it's supposed to get there. Jay mentioned air freight. Like if it's supposed to come by plane, like what's the status of the plane?
Yeah.
If it's supposed to come by boat, how long does that boat typically take, and where does it come from, and what route does it take, and what countries does it go through along the way, or what ports does it need to go through along the way? And then to the point that we were just talking about is understand your risks. So there can be significant risk, like you could be on the hook for the entire thing, or there could be relatively minimal risk. But you need to understand that from the shipping itself. But like Jay mentioned too, like even if the product doesn't transfer until you receive it, like if it's lost along the way, you still have to get that product, and so
Yeah.
that is still a risk to you of what other mitigation strategy do I need to have in place just in case. And so having at least given that some thought, because again, this isn't something that happens all of the time, but it can be something that happens. And so making sure that you have given it thought and have in place some kind of strategy around like what would we do if can be extremely valuable. And And then once you've done that, one of the other things that you can do is to plan appropriately. And so that's to be really thoughtful about when you need inventory, how much inventory you need, how flexible you want to be with your lead times and reorder points, and stock levels as well. Like, do you want to carry 3 months of stock? And what are the impacts of carrying 3 months of stock all the time? And does that mean that if you had something happen to some stock, or there's other things that can happen too, like if your provider has if your vendor, they've made the stock but you get it and you're like, wait a second, this is the wrong color, like what are we doing here? Like, you can run into the same type of problem because you now have to replace that or figure out what to do with it, and understand whether or not it matters that it's the wrong color, or that it's in the wrong package or something. There could be all kinds of
special edition. Here we come.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Special. There's some ways you can respond, but without giving it some thought in advance, like it doesn't. You wouldn't be able to respond timely, and so being able to plan appropriately can be really, really critical. And it may be that you identify some critical products. So your store you may sell like 90% of 5 things, right? That may be like your main things, and you have a bunch of ancillary products. And so the ancillary products you're more comfortable running out because maybe you're not the market leader of that, and it's just an add-on product, that kind of thing. But your core products you never want to run out of for the reasons that Jay talked about before. The other thing too is definitely to consider having different vendors because if you're relying solely on one, there could be all kinds of things that could hold you up specifically to them. In China, for instance, if you're needing something in early February, you want to be really, really, really thoughtful, or maybe it might be early March, right? Because you want to be really thoughtful about that because they're not going to make it in February because of Chinese New Year. They just shut down the entire manufacturing operations are shut down for Chinese New Year. And so you need to be really thoughtful about, when do I need this? Why do I need it? And what am I going to do with it once I have it? Because you can plan to have that extra inventory to cover you for the period of time where you're not going to be able to reorder, but you need to be able to do something with it once it gets here, and understand that you're going to have some extra carrying costs and some extra other charges. What other things can business owners do, or even advisors like ourselves? Like, what can we be thinking about to help manage supply chain issues?
So you mentioned having alternative suppliers, and I think given what's going on in the world as far as the piracy issues and going around
The
Cape
Canaveral.
No,
That's right.
no, on the southern tip of Africa, coming around Cape Horn, I think it is.
Cape Horn.
And,
oh my gosh,
it's taking
Cape Canaveral is where the rockets go from, right?
Right. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's embarrassing.
Yes. KSA for sure, but it's taking. I don't know if it's 2 additional weeks to navigate instead of going through the Red Sea and through northern Africa, but going all the way around it. So it's increasing your lead times, it's increasing the cost, and at that point, when we're negotiating with our vendors, we're looking at the price to manufacture the item.
Right.
We have to look at that and bring in that landed cost when we're evaluating that.
Yeah,
and
it's so
might
critical.
Be worth looking at a North American or even a South American manufacturer, because the time to transport is less. So if the time is less, the dollars to do it are going to be less. It should follow right along. Now,
right.
It might not, but but think about you're in the Texas area and you're working with a manufacturer that's in Colorado.
Right.
It's what, a 1-day truck trip?
Yeah, probably. You'd probably get that
on a truck
quickly.
and it's there in 24, 36 hours. And, think about the other considerations. You're buying containers full of materials. So you also need to have space to warehouse it. And
Yeah.
space is gotten hugely expensive. If you're warehousing with Amazon, it's hugely expensive.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're using your space to the best you can. You're not overutilizing it or having to rent additional space to do that. So maybe with those manufacturers that are closer to home, you can actually store less and be able to cut other costs as well. So there are a lot of different factors that come into play there.
Absolutely. There's absolutely no question that that's true. And it can be like hugely valuable to think about that right. And then especially if they're like pretty close in price, like those changes can make a big difference.
Right.
I Googled it. Cape Agulhas is on the southern tip of Africa.
Okay.
Cape Horn is on the southern tip of South America. And
gotcha.
So
okay.
The one
I
you
gotcha.
skip from the Panama Canal.
I knew it was one of those capes, so it's all good.
Cape something, and that's where I came up with the wrong cape.
Yeah.
So
Christy has a question, so I'll let you take it from there.
Sure, yeah. She asked, what are the most common shipping things that aren't FOB? And I want to make sure that we're really clear, because FOB, which is free on board or freight on board, like that is only a part of the shipping term. There are two other like critical distinctions, and these are the most common, and at least the ones that I've seen most frequently. The first one is FOB shipping point. So that's the freight charges. That's the kind of identifies that the goods change hands at the shipping point. So it's now your goods once you get off the shipper's dock. The other one is FOB destination, which is where, when it comes to your port, there are all kinds of other language that go around that can talk about, like, it's at the port, it's literally at your doorstep. It's when you have to pay for it because you have to pay for it, like by carrier check or whatever, what cashier's check or something, whatever. Like you have to pay for it immediately once the boat gets there, or the truck gets there, or something like that. And so there truly are. They feel like, anyway, there's like a million different options, but there's two or three like main ones. FOB origin, FOB shipping. Those are kind of the same thing. FOB destination is the other side when it's switches hands once it gets there. And so knowing those different things are really important. Again, I Googled some of these to talk through, just to run them off. Like there's FAS, free alongside. There's FCA, free carrier. There's XWorks. There's delivered X ship. Like there's just all kinds of different things here, and that's why it's so important to understand which one you're under, because those things are often associated with the direct rules are related to when did the title transfer, who is at risk, who is responsible for the carrier costs. There's just so many different things that are involved in that, and those decisions are often made at the PO purchase time. Like you need to know what you've agreed to in advance, and be able to evaluate that, because there are so many different things that come along with shipping that fully understanding exactly what your exposure is and what your risks are can be really critical there.
Speaking of risks, the last time I dealt with FOB and shipping point, destination, and those other terms was an internal audit working for Siemens.
Sure.
And we not only had to do all that, we had to determine how long it took, if it was on destination, how long it took for those shipments to get to their... we had to track a number of shipments.
Yeah.
See how long it took to get there and make sure that they did get there if there were any claims, and we had to report all that back to the audit department. And it wasn't fun.
No, and it definitely isn't. And when those lead times are really long, and especially if you're ordering something from like across the world, it becomes extremely important to do that, because that's your inventory,
right? And
that inventory in transit, you need to record that liability. You need to record that inventory. And so from an audit perspective, that was the thing that we always looked at in those types of shipping documents, especially for things that were longer lead times.
Well,
because
the other thing they were also looking at was, well, if it's destination, it hasn't transferred title yet. So we're going to back off the sales too and book that as unrecognized revenue.
Yeah,
at that
right.
point.
Yeah, and so if it's you,
there are a lot
if
of
it's you
plays
who's
at that.
if it's you who's doing the shipping, right?
Yeah.
That is truly an exposure as well,
Yeah.
because it isn't actually you haven't satisfied the obligation that you have until those goods get to the destination. That's not a sale.
Right.
That's exactly right. And so so outbound, this matters as well. And so there are considerations both inbound and also outbound, because it makes a big difference, and especially if you're shipping in really large quantities, either direction, like those can be pretty substantial changes in your assets and liabilities. It truly can. And so, or in your case, like you're talking about, it's your sales. So on the income statement as well. And so it is really, really important to understand that, and to know what that term means for you in your business. Absolutely.
One more quick story regarding that. So when I had my nutraceutical business, we were buying 3 pallets of whey protein a week.
Yeah.
And we had one that came in that, when they build their pallets, there was kind of a column through the center of it. And when it was on a truck, something got into one of those pallets. And
like a critter? We talking about like a raccoon?
Yeah, could have been. I don't know what it was, but all I could tell you was after it ate all that protein, it was bulked up. But so
throwing them off the truck.
So because it was shipping point, we were responsible for it, and we had to go. The manufacturer wouldn't cover it. We had to go back to the shipper. And it took quite a while to do that, so we ended up negotiating the terms and making it destination at that point.
Huge.
So we didn't have to deal with that. It was truly huge, because it was like, back then it was $2,500 for a pallet of protein. That's a lot of money to a bootstrap manufacturing company.
Yeah, no question. Like it is really. That's why it's so important to know this. I mean, that's a wonderful example. Were you insured for it?
We were insured for it, but we had to file the claim. It would have been so much easier just to have the manufacturers replace it.
Yeah, right.
And
of course.
The shipper said, "Well, based on our terms, we can offer you X dollars," and they did. They gave us whatever it was, and then the insurance covered the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that also, like, not only does it matter what your relationship is with your supplier, but it also matters what your relationship is with that carrier.
For sure.
Because there are some situations where the carrier should have managed this process,
right.
and should have been the people on top of this, making sure that the truck wasn't sitting somewhere where it could get a squirrel or a whatever. Bulked out raccoon, rocket or something, rocket raccoon over there. Anyway, those are definitely like important things to be thinking about, and most people don't, because it's just a thing that's on the piece of paper, right?
Yep,
so most people don't even really think about what that means, and when you're never having problems, then it doesn't matter to you, right?
You don't think about it until it does happen to you.
Yeah. You don't think about it until you have that exposure, and so what I would tell you is it does matter. Before you have that exposure, it is an important thing to be thoughtful about.
Take it from those of us that have lived through some of those experiences. It's no different than when we're mentoring, new CPAs that have gone off and started running their own practice. Learn from us. We've been there. We've made those mistakes. We will point them out to you so you can avoid those potholes.
Yep, and that's and using the wrong FOB terms, totally a problem. Don't do that. Be really thoughtful, or at least understand like what that means, because it does matter, and it can have a huge impact on the business, on your business or your client's business, for sure. What other shipping things do we want to talk about, or do we want to talk a little bit about landed cost and how?
Yeah, I think it's important to do that because, with a lot of goods being shipped from China to the U.S. or Japan, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. If it's coming from outside the U.S., not only are you paying shipping, but you're also paying duties and other fees.
Yeah, tariffs.
So when you're doing that, and I can't tell you how many clients I've taken on, and they have this large freight expense in COGS, And then they also have, more often than not, it's duties and freight and COGS. I'm like, what is that? And, well, that's what we pay to bring our goods in. I said,
Yeah.
well, you probably should be doing that as a landed cost and keeping that in the cost of your inventory.
Yep.
And they're like, wow, why would we do that? I mean, we're just, there's the $16,000 we spent last month. Yeah, but you spent $16,000 to bring in merchandise that you're going to sell over the next 6 months.
That's right, and that's a huge point. And let me continue. Like, let me explain that a little bit farther. Because if you're paying $16,000 that one time, but you're not ordering product for another 3 months, now you have a $16,000 charge in March, but you don't have a charge in April, and you don't have a charge in May, and so your income, if you're doing it that way, is going to fluctuate when you get your shipments. And it's not going to truly represent the utilization of that inventory, because it took that cost, it took that freight, that duty cost, it took that to get the inventory to you. And so because of that, you should be capturing that as a component of your inventory. So when you relieve yourself of that good, when somebody buys that good, then you should be recognizing that cost in a corresponding manner. And if you don't do that, then what you'll see it happen. Your margins will look weird in months where you have big freight bills, and you won't be able to. I mean, it will be very easy to explain, but it still looks very unusual when you see it. And so it is so much more powerful to be able to associate that properly with the goods that came along with that freight bill. Because if you do have, for some reason, some slower moving item that doesn't move in 3 months, or doesn't move even within the year, then you want those costs to carry out as they should, in the same manner as that inventory that you're selling. And so from a tax perspective, does that make a big difference, Jay?
It can. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're costing your inventory on the cash method,
Yeah.
on a cash basis, which I don't recommend you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the only time it really would. I mean, the biggest impact is going to be on cash flow when looking at that. And, when you're trying to analyze your sales and your cost of goods, you want to try to keep that as consistent as possible. And if you're throwing in one-time fees every couple of months, it's going to have that roller coaster effect, and you don't want to see that.
No.
When you look at this, and let's say that $16,000 was for 100,000 pieces, it's only $1.60 that you're going to attach to the cost of every piece of that shipment.
Right.
Now, depending on the system you're using, it might do it based on the piece, it might do it based on the cost. So, it might allocate more to the product that costs $5 versus the product that costs $2.50. So
right.
it might be $2 versus $1 in that case.
Yeah.
Things along those lines.
Right.
So, you want it to actually reflect more actuality, so that you're comparing properly.
Well, and there's all kinds of ramifications from that too. So not only does it allow you to compare properly, but it allows you to evaluate your pricing properly.
Right.
Because if even the example that you've just described, if you were allocating the costs equally across those goods, but selling the things at significantly different price. So one good's going to look really, really good because you're got these gigantic margins on it, and one's going to look a little bit tighter because you don't. When that may not be actually reflective of the true value that you're getting from those different goods. And so go ahead, Jake.
It's funny you said that. It just brought back a memory. I was working on an implementation at one point, and the company that we were putting the system in for was giving me what they were selling the products for.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're not trying to make a profit off of this. We just want to cover our costs plus a little bit, a little overhead.
Yeah.
And they were costing things out at $5, and then you look at their cost, it was $5.10, $5.20. It's you're losing money on every unit you're selling, and that was without even adding in the labor. I mean, the landed cost. And so it's you can't compare things, especially when we're in these inflationary times when prices are changing so fast, and you've got to keep your costs in line. You got to have all that information so you can ensure you're not losing money on every product.
It's so critical. Because in that same situation that you were talking about, the first the two examples ago, like if that $5 item, if it's being allocated $1 of freight, and the $2.50 item is also being allocated $1 of freight, like but you're selling the one product for $7 or something, you're a tight margin for whatever.
Right.
But if you were to reallocate those freight costs based on the dollar value, and then that may change your impact there. It may change you from being positive to negative. Or if for some other reason that the less expensive product weighs a whole lot more or is a whole bunch bigger, and so the freight charges really should be allocated more to the lower product, maybe that means that that smaller, less valuable product is one that you shouldn't even mess around with. Like if it's just a product that again is one of your ancillary things like that. Right. Being really thoughtful about how you're evaluating your landed costs and making sure that you're doing it is extremely important to evaluating your overall profitability over time. There's no question.
Most definitely.
Do you have any other fun landed cost stories or freight related stories, supply chain stories?
Not that I can think of at the moment, but I'm sure I'll start getting some of those memories kicking in tonight, and I'll start writing some of that down.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, speaking of tonight, well, let me first ask, do we have any other shipping or landed cost related topics to talk about?
We covered that pretty well today.
All right, wonderful. There, yeah. Wonderful. So while your news story comes to light, while you're this evening, like what will you be doing? What you got going on this weekend?
This week, well, it's Easter weekend, and
that's a good point.
For a nice Jewish boy like myself, we'll be getting the family together. My wife's family and some friends, and celebrating on Sunday.
So I feel really ignorant right now.
Yeah.
What's the Easter celebration for the good Jewish boys?
There isn't one.
All right, I didn't think so. I just wanted to make sure. It's just a regular Sunday, right? You're just having your family over.
Yeah, I mean NASCAR's running at Richmond, and we have people over, so it's gonna be great.
That's great.
But I was gonna add to that, but I can't remember what it was now.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
My wife's birthday was yesterday, so I know she's not watching right now, but she might watch later. So happy birthday, Kayla! I can't wait for this weekend when Kayla and I, and a couple of her friends, we're gonna go make candles. So we're doing a candle making class for her birthday tomorrow,
nice.
and then going to a nice dinner after. So should be a pretty exciting weekend from that perspective. A little bit of party time, hopefully. We got the. We had some help in furnishing the house when we bought it, and one of the things that the people that were helping, like what they bought a candle from West Elm, and it smells amazing, but it doesn't have the scent on the candle jar. We don't know what it is.
Oh gosh!
And so we have been looking to find this scent again, and so I'm hopeful that we can either do a little bit of extra internet sleuthing to try to figure out what at least our options are here, or that we can take it with us and talk to the candle making experts this weekend, or something like that, to be able to replicate that smell, because it is it's an amazing smell. And the first day that we walked, the candle was in our bedroom. The first day that we walked into our bedroom after we'd gotten it, had gotten finished moving in and all that, I was like, smells amazing in here. What's going on? What is this? Because most of the time, candles are either very leathery or can be very fruity, but it's not that. It's just very mellow, very chill. Oh gosh, just great smell. So I'm really looking forward to
I hope you find out and share,
recreate it. I will definitely have to share our candle making experience. It's BYOB, so I'm gonna have to find a bottle of wine to bring, I think, for the candle making experience, and there may be, who knows what kind of stories will come out of making candles.
Sure.
You would get some history of candle making, I think, so that should be pretty fun, and who knows what else. I'm excited for it, and I'm really looking forward to trying that for the first time.
Nice.
Did it come back to you, Jay? Whatever was on your mind before?
No, it's all good.
Any pizza this weekend?
Oh, actually, I do remember. The other thing
Oh.
is because on Easter Sunday, our friend's coming with their 2 and 4-year-old, and I was just joking, saying, "Well, one of them's going to end up in the pool." So Wendy's like, "You better turn the heater on." So yes, we have a heater for our pool in Florida because it takes forever to heat it up until the dead of the summer.
Oh, okay.
So it's actually at 82 degrees today. I got it up to 82 degrees. It was 67
The pool is.
when I started.
Oh
this
yeah!
week.
Wow.
So,
yeah, that's a big change.
So pool might be in play this weekend.
Yeah, 67 feels like that would be not good, right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah. What is the what does it have? I have two questions as follow-ups. So what's the optimal pool temperature? Is it 82 or 85 or something?
It depends on the time of year.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because if the air is colder and the water, let's say, is 82 or 80, anywhere between 82 and 85, the water's warmer than the air. It's perfect.
Uh-huh.
But when it's in the 90s,
Yeah, it's still 80.
anything between 82 and 88 is heaven.
You feel? Oh, it's still good.
Yeah.
So it's still good. All right. So 82 to 88 is kind of your.
I
got a
prefer.
broad window there.
I like 85. I mean, I think at that point it's perfect. But
All right.
The wife and the daughter prefer a little warmer than that.
And then my second question around this is, how does the pool temperature typically relate to the weather outside? So when it's 95, is the pool 88? Is the pool 95? How's that work?
If the pool is up in the upper 80s and in the middle of the summer, ordinarily every day we would get thunderstorms.
Oh, okay.
And if we do, and they last long enough, it will drop the temperature and keep it moderated versus those days when we don't have it and it's in the mid 90s. Because normally it's not getting below 85 anyway at night, so it's not going to lose temp.
Oh, okay.
So, but when we have that rain, it moderates it and brings the temperature down. We know summer's kicked in because we will go and drop that much water. The water will drop that much in a week. And if you're not paying attention, it'll start sucking air and you'll blow out your pump. So you never want to do that.
No, that seems like a real bad thing to do.
I'm going to knock on wood on that because I don't feel like replacing a pump anytime soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Especially with these supply chain issues, how are you ever going to get one?
Right, exactly.
Do we have any big expectations for next week?
Next week, it's all about cranking out tax returns and getting that GL closed. Not much else on my mind at this point.
Makes sense. Are you already extended, Jay?
I am not.
But I assume you will be.
I will be. Yeah, for sure.
I think I might be able to get mine done. I need to probably look at that this weekend or next weekend and see if I can get it done. We don't have too much complicated stuff going on. So I hadn't thought about that. That was a really sad realization. So maybe I'll talk about filling out my own tax return next week.
There you go.
The CPA who doesn't do taxes does taxes. We'll see how it goes. Should be a joy.
For sure.
Yeah.
Let's redact the name on it and let's go line by line and see what it looks like.
I don't think we're definitely not doing that. But I will gladly talk about my experience because I have in the past few years I've done my tax return for myself. I actually think this is kind of an interesting topic.
Yeah.
And maybe when we can touch on more after, if I do it this weekend, if not, then maybe the following weekend. But I've done my own tax return all the time. And it's a disaster sometimes. But normally not, right? My wife and I are both W-2 employees, right? So for the most part, we have some investment income, some small dividends, some small interest, not loads of weird stuff going on. And so this year it's probably going to be really easy. But we have a variety of investment accounts, and so we have like different reports that I have to compile, like her W-2 and my W-2 and all of our 1099 whatevers that come from the different investing platforms that we have.
Yeah.
Even if it's, you know, even if it's just a couple dollars, right? You still get it, and so you want to make sure that it gets on there. And so I have an Excel spreadsheet that I put together a few years ago to like try and capture all that stuff. And then prior to that, before we moved into this house, we lived in a townhouse, and I Airbnb'd out of the townhouse. And I was the person who managed the listing. I was the person who cleaned the room. I was the person who like did everything associated with it. And so I was heavily involved in this real estate activity. And so like managing that was, and on a tax return, even for, you know, just a couple $1,000s a year, is a lot, because you have to track all of the different costs that you have. You have to consider like how much was the cleaning supplies that you used that year. What part of the electricity is associated with this room? What part of the house is associated with this room?
Right.
What do you do with that when you sell the house? Like all of the different things that go along with this over the past few years have been complications that, and especially in the year that we sold the house, I was like, I think I can do this right. I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to be really wrong, but like, how much should this even cost? And this is a thing that like I even as a CPA, right? I had no idea how to price my own tax return because I don't know. Like, there's not good pricing models out there. There's not good information available for just the general public who has not like, you know, I didn't get K1, right? I don't have pass-through income. I don't have, you know, 5 businesses and a bunch of LLCs and an S corp with real estate in it or something that was like some other kind of disaster, right? Like, I didn't do anything like that. I just rented out a room in my house, and I did that for like before COVID for like 5 years, right? Like I did that for a while, and where does it go? Like who? And how do you know that you did it right? And what can you do? And what is reasonable? And there's a lot of information out there. EY had a guide for renters, and that specifically came out shortly after Airbnb kind of became more popular.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I can follow along. I read EY guides about like other kinds of complex accounting all the time, and so like, I can follow the rules, I guess, kind of, but like, did I do it right? Did I make the right decision? I have no idea. And so I definitely considered it a couple years. Again, the year we sold the house, I was like, should I just have a tax professional do this? And then, you know, I'm like looking at the firm that I worked with, like before I came to High Rock, our minimum was like $1,500 or something. I'm like, well, that's too much. but it's just like, what is the right price?
Right.
And so I think that would be a really interesting topic to talk about, of just what's the right price for like somewhat complicated, like maybe somewhat not even really all that complicated. It sounds like pretty easy 1040 really, but like
that is when you know to turn around and go the other way. It's
yeah, there you go.
It's easy until you get into it, and then it's like, oh crap, look at all that.
Yeah,
so
it's not as easy.
That is always a complication. But just curious, what tool do you use to do your tax return?
So this is probably really embarrassing. Maybe. I use an Excel spreadsheet to consolidate the line items, and then I use the free e-filing tool on the IRS.gov, the e-file for whatever, and populate the form myself. It's not it's free, which I like. I long ago when I worked with RSM, like they had a deal with TurboTax where it was free. So I used TurboTax for a few years, a long time ago when I was just W-2 stuff. But once it got more complicated, I was like, you know what? I don't really. I can fill out those forms. I know how this works. I don't need to pay into it to do it for me. And I'm just as confident that I'm going to do it right as if I input the information and could have got all kinds of results. Who knows what comes out of that, right? So yeah, I can't. It's for like e-file free e-file. I don't know, something like that. One of those. There's 3 or 4 options. I think
that's great. I need to check that out.
I mean, maybe it's great. I have no idea, but I do. I have to. I've done that for 4 or 5 or 6 years now,
Yeah.
where I used that same thing. I used the same model. I built it out like basically an accounting tool for the Airbnb of like what was our revenue this year, what were our costs, how did we break them out, how did they fall into Schedule C, and then filled out the forms. Like I added it when I needed to, and went on with those. This is going to be like this. I'm really excited for this year actually, because I think this is the first one where I'm really not going to have to worry about it. So it's going to be like finally easy.
Nice.
Like truly easy, because we don't have the new baby this year. She was new last year. We don't have the property that we sold 2 years ago because that was 2 years ago. So, and then we're not doing the Airbnb anymore because we are in the new house now. So
Right.
I think we're just W-2s and random 1099s. So
Easy peasy.
hopefully so.
Yeah.
Famous last words though. I know exactly how that goes. I'm going to get into it and be like,
Yep.
wait, what? What are these numbers?
Yep.
Actually, I already know that I'm going to have a problem, and I'm not sure exactly what the impact is going to be because the rules are so complicated. And it's I probably shouldn't talk about it here, but I'm sure that I'm going to do it correctly, so I'm not really worried about it. But my wife and I both contributed to a dependent care FSA, and we both contributed to the max without realizing that it was a family max, not an individual max. And so I'm going to have some extra taxable income that I hadn't considered previously. So I'm going to probably have a small. Well, hopefully we had a little bit of extra withholding between the two of us.
John, I've seen that come into play, not with childcare, but with HSAs.
Oh, is there a family max on those as well?
Both spouses will do that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well. Yeah, thankfully we kind of migrated all of our stuff to one portfolio of healthcare, so that's helpful at least. But yeah, that'll be an exciting story to see how it goes. To see,
I can't wait to hear.
I owe like $2,000 in tax because of random X, Y, and Z. Hopefully we'll get a refund. That'll be fun. But hopefully we owe $10 or something. That would be like the best situation. I think that's always the best is when you're or a $10 refund. That would be even better.
Plus or minus $100 is where you want to be. It means you've set your W-2s up right.
Yep.
If you have a business, you've done your proper estimated payments.
Yeah.
But then I know a lot of people, and they use their tax refund as like a Christmas club. They're more than happy to get $5,000 back because they can just keep overpaying, and they do that. And it's like, hey, April's here; it's time to go spend. So it just depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, when I was a young kid, I used to love that tax refund.
Yeah.
But as I grew up a little bit, I was like, wait a second, no, this is terrible. And I even actually did some diligence at one point in time to be like, can we flip this around? Can I just not pay and pay later and arbitrage this?
Right.
Which you can't do. You can pay quarterly, but that's like the maximum exposure. I think that's right. I think your maximum like length of arbitrage or whatever is quarterly, and at that point it's really not the effort would be you'd be doing it for like $10 to $20.
Right. The only time you can really do it is if you had no exposure and you had no tax due because you had no estimated payments to make.
Oh, from the prior year, yeah,
from the prior year, right? Because the requirement is you make estimated payments
based on your prior tax due.
Right. You have to make, depending on your income level, 90% of your prior year tax, or at some level, 110% of your current tax if your income is at a certain limit, which I couldn't tell you at the moment because I'm not thinking about tax.
Yeah. So I did definitely looked into that. That was actually while I was on that on the governmental audit. That's what I was doing in my free time in those evenings was investigating how does federal withholding work, and why do I have to pay? Why am I floating the government money?
Exactly.
And then I did my best to try to limit that as much as possible. And then of course the new W4 is just an absolute shit show. So
Oh my gosh, it's horrible.
the first year I was so thankful that our Airbnb was actually a loss because we had under withheld because the new W4 came out and one of us didn't pick because we both changed jobs within the 1 or 2 year span and we didn't pick the right box of that we're both making money here. And so I was like,
3 years later, it isn't any better.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that it's still the same problem. And as I hear it, it might even be worse now than it was before. So who knows? That'll be a fun. I can't wait to be under withheld. That'll be just an absolute. That'll be a joy of a show next week.
For sure, right?
If we get there, and then next week I can't wait to talk about it. It's solar eclipse time. It's coming.
Right over Texas too.
Mondays. Yeah, I'm right over Dallas. I don't even have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about that a little more next Friday.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you everyone who is out there in cyberspace and watching our episode. This has been On the Rocks. I'm Chris. That's Jay. We'll see you next week.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye.